Sunday School friends, it's Mrs. Russo. I have a couple of themes that I want to investigate together this week as we look at some of the Bible verses and Bible stories that we read from the lectionary. The first one I want to talk about is the story of Samuel. And Samuel was just a little boy when he was at the temple learning from the priest, Eli. And he was also helping Eli because Eli was very, very old and couldn't see very well and had a hard time getting around because of that. So not only did Samuel help Eli get around, but he was also learning about how to serve God. And one of the biggest things that we read about in this story from the book of Samuel is his listening. And he said to God, he learned from Eli to tell God, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." So being a servant means that we work for God, right? That we might build something that we use, right? We're not going to build a deck, for example, that God is going to use. But when we work as if we're working for God, not for man. So we put our effort into it because we know that makes God proud of us and that we can use the skills that we've been given to serve God and to serve other people. Yeah, so maybe that deck that we built on our house is going to be used for fellowship with our friends, where we can demonstrate God's love through fellowship, right? That's how we would work for God as a servant. Yeah? So that's what Samuel said. He said, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." Now, listening is kind of hard sometimes. It is hard for Mrs. Russo, and let me tell you why. Because my brain processes my thinking through my words. So, as Father Stephen used to tell me, I don't know what I'm thinking until I start speaking. Now, he told that about himself. He was speaking about himself, but it applies to me too. I have taken this to heart because I know that that's how my brain works. But if I'm talking all the time, I can't listen. Yeah? And God doesn't speak to us like we're talking on the phone to somebody, right? Oh gosh, at least maybe he doesn't talk to me like that. Maybe he talks to some of you like that. That would be awesome. If he does say, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening," maybe God will keep talking to you like that. But let's think about other ways how God might talk to us so that we can really listen. Okay? God Speaks in Whispers by Mark Batterson and Summer Batterson Dailey. Big sound, little sound. Where in the world is God's voice found? Can you hear God crashing in the waves? Can you hear him echo, echo, echo in the caves? Do you hear him when a bird chirps or when your sister slurps? Can you hear him on top of a mountain or even at the drinking fountain? Do you hear God's voice when you're feeling sad? Or perhaps when you're a little mad? God speaks through stars that shoot through the sky. God speaks in whispers as soft as a sigh. Why is God whispering so you barely hear? It's really quite simple, because you have to get near. Sort of like Grandma who gives you a hug or tucks you in bed all nice and snug. God whispers down deep to the depths of your heart, "I've been with you from the very start." God speaks through his word, so you know what's right. God speaks in dreams, both by day and by night. God speaks through nature, like a big blue glacier. God speaks through family and friends, and so much more. Sometimes right in the middle of a chore. Just like waves that speak for the ocean, or friends who make quite the commotion. Oh my goodness. God points the way for you to go. God whispers things you need to know. He says what is true, that you can be you, even in all of your hullabaloo. Late at night, after you close your eyes, and long before it's time to rise, God is present, God is waiting, God is even recreating. So when you wake up to a world that's spinning, jump out of bed, get dressed, start grinning, for God's whisper is in your smile. A smile even bigger than a crocodile. Some days are filled with lots of fun, like running and jumping and playing in the sun. Mom tickles your tummy and makes you wiggle until you let out a great big giggle. But even on days that aren't so good, days when you don't feel heard or understood, your feelings, they matter, even if they're all mixed up, like pancake batter. God is speaking, rain or shine. God is loving all the time. Remember that God is still right here, listening to every single prayer. Above all else, know this is true, that God is singing all around you. And what is he saying in that voice, still and small? That you, my dear, are his favorite of all. The end. I encourage you this week to listen. Listen when you hear God's voice. I don't hear God's voice like a telephone, but I hear God's voice in my heart when I sense danger. Like, oh, we better look both ways, right? Or when I hear a bird singing and watch a bird jumping around, being curious about something that's on that deck that I made, I think God is speaking through that bird. That bird is wondering and is curious about my deck and what might be on that we dropped from the last fellowship. God can speak to us in so many ways if we listen. So take a moment this week, or maybe a few, and just listen to God's voice.